If you were wandering through England in 1596, you might have bumped into a young man who looked like he was on official business. He carried a folded sheet of parchment with all the right flourishes and all the right signatures. He walked with the sort of confidence that suggested that he was meant to be on the road. And that parchment, which he presented to constables and parish officials along the way, allowed him to travel the entire length and breadth of the kingdom without anyone stopping to question him. The problem, though, is that that document was completely fake. Settle in, my friend, get cozy, grab a beverage, let's chat about vagabonds and fake passports. Hey friend, welcome back to the YouTube channel for the Renaissance English History Podcast. I am your host, Heather. I've been podcasting on Tudor England since 2009 with my show, which makes it the original Tudor History Podcast. I am, as always, delighted that you are here with me today to talk about vagabonds and fake passports. Let's dig in. I actually discovered this the other day when I did a short minicast on Tudor passports, and I wanted to dig into it and explore it a little bit more. It is honestly worth an episode on its own. So this forged passport that we were just talking about eventually landed on the desk of Justice Edward Hext of Somerset. He was already in a mood. Hext was one of those magistrates who actually tried to enforce the law, and by 1596, he felt as if the entire country was just falling apart all around him. So when he caught the bearer of this passport, he wrote an exasperated letter to the Privy Council complaining that crime was spiraling out of control. Local officers were asleep at their posts, and this ridiculous document had survived inspection from one end of England to the other. And then, to make matters worse, the man who was carrying the forged passport turned out to not be a starving wanderer at all. He was the heir to land worth £40 a year, a respectable young gentleman, someone with an estate waiting for him at home. Yet he had chosen to slip into the world of rogues and masterless men armed with a counterfeit license and a convincing backstory. So to understand how he pulled this off, we actually have to shift our expectations about what a Tudor passport actually was. In the 16th century, a passport wasn't just an international travel document, but it was a permission slip. It allowed someone to move from parish to parish without being arrested as a vagabond. These papers were issued to a wide assortment of people. Soldiers who had been discharged from foreign campaigns would receive travel passes so that they could make their way back home. Injured veterans often carried certificates from their captains confirming their wounds. Licensed beggars from places like York or Durham bore papers that would permit them to seek alms in specific towns. Even foreign merchants or diplomatic messengers might carry letters of safe conduct. The problem was that everybody knew that these documents existed, but hardly anybody knew what a genuine one actually looked like. A constable in Somerset might see only 2 or 3 official papers in an entire year. If a stranger turns up with a bit of parchment that has a seal attached and a plausible story, most local officers would simply wave them on. Some couldn't read. Some didn't care to. A piece of paper with a smear of red wax and a flourish of secretary hand was generally good enough. The late 1590s were the perfect moment for this kind of deception. England was groaning under the pressure of a dreadful harvest crisis. Inflation was soaring. Landlords were fencing off common fields in a wave of enclosures that was leaving many rural families homeless. The dissolution of the monasteries had removed the old system of charities. People in our yearly program in the Tudor Top 50, this coming week, we're actually going to be talking about this even deeper because we're talking about the Poor Laws. We're at that point where we're discussing the passage of the Elizabethan Poor Laws. Anyway, that's for those people. Veterans of the wars with Spain and the Low Countries, they were returning with no pay and no prospects. Thousands of people were taking to the roads in search of work or food, and many slipped into a life of petty theft or trickery. Trickery was the name because there was simply no other way to survive. But poverty was only one piece of the story. The Tudor authorities believed that a great many vagabonds were actually perfectly capable of working and simply preferred a life of mischief. That belief shaped a century of vagrancy laws instructing constables to whip and burn the ears of unlicensed wanderers. Yet, despite the harsh punishments on the books, enforcement was chaotic. Hext complained that only a fifth of felons were ever arrested. Those who were caught often escaped before trial. Juries refused to convict. Constables ignored their duty and accepted bribes. In Hext's words in his letter, the whole country was pestered with thieves. In this landscape, the world of rogues flourished. Tudor writers described a lively underworld with its own ranks and specialties. Some could feign an illness, others pretended to be maimed soldiers. There were counterfeit cranks who frothed at the mouth with soap to gain pity. There were clapperdudgeons who bound their limbs with tight bandages to fake terrible wounds. There were upright men who acted as leaders among the wandering crews. Tricksters, con artists, pickpockets, and card sharps filled the taverns of Cheapside and Southwark. These were the people that the forged passport heir chose to join. Within this world of wandering tricksters, a forged passport was actually one of the best tools that a rogue could carry. A convincing document could get you out of awkward questions, through guarded bridges, past superstitious constables, and into towns that were trying very, very hard to shut their gates to strangers during times of scarcity. Some passports bore the signatures of noblemen or bishops who probably had zero idea that their names were being used. Others had seals made from carved turnips or balls of resin pressed into warm wax to mimic official impressions. A few were stolen from real soldiers and passed around among groups of young men who had never served a day in the Queen's army. This heir caught by Justice Hext had one of those passports. Hext enclosed it with his letter to the Privy Council, almost as if to say, "You guys, look at what I'm dealing with." The document claimed the young man was traveling with authorization. It had enough ornamentation to impress the casual eye, and it carried the signature of a well-known official. Hext was baffled that so many officers had let it pass without question. To him, the passport was not just the story of one rogue, it was proof of a wider collapse in discipline. You can almost hear the frustration in Hext's voice. In his mind, a healthy kingdom required firm order, steady enforcement, and constables who took their responsibilities seriously. Yet here he was, watching Somerset fill with wanderers who drifted from parish to parish. Some were genuinely starving, which he acknowledged. Many were not. He described the roads as crowded with men whose confidence alone carried them forward. They knocked on doors, they took alms, they slipped into barns, and then they moved on before anyone realized that they had been in the parish at all. This forged passport is important because it shows how much that confidence mattered. If you walked into a village like you belonged there, if you had this sheet of parchment that suggested that someone in authority approved your travels, the odds were definitely in your favor. Most constables didn't want the trouble of arresting a man on the road. Trials took time and paperwork. Transporting prisoners cost money. Hext's letter hints that many officers were choosing the easier path. They saw the passport and they let the traveler continue. This makes this particular heir's journey feel surprisingly modern. He gamed the system simply by understanding where its weak points were. He counted on officers who didn't want extra work. He trusted that most people would rather believe a confident story than risk a confrontation. He created a fake identity that worked because the people checking it had no reliable way to verify anything. Tudor England was still working in terms of personal reputation, local knowledge, and parish boundaries, not centralized records. In that environment, a forged document was generally as good as a real one. When Hext finally exposed the lie, he actually used the opportunity to issue a broader warning. His county was overwhelmed by wandering men they just weren't who they claimed to be. His fellow justices were inconsistent. His constables were unreliable. Criminals escaped far too often. And here was this young gentleman, heir to a respectable estate, choosing a life on the road because he could. He wanted to have some fun before he inherited, I suppose. Hext saw it as a sign that the entire social fabric of England was just falling apart around him. The forged passport allowed us to see that strain up close. It also shows us that vagabonds would come from every class, not just the poor. And it showed how official paperwork could be copied or stolen and reused dozens of times. This passport places us in a world where identity was fluid, travel was suspect, and a single sheet of parchment could open every gate in the kingdom until somebody finally took the time to look at it closely. By the time we reach the end of Hext's story, we can just imagine the scene. The young heir is brought before the justice, the forged passport laid out on the table. Hext studies it, sees immediately that it's wrong, and realizes that half the kingdom has already accepted it as real. It's both absurd and revealing, a small piece of evidence that tells a much larger story. If anything, this one counterfeit document captured the chaotic energy of England in the last years of Elizabeth's reign. A country where thousands of people were on the move, where old systems were failing, and where quick wits mattered often more than birth or station. And somewhere on the road from Durham to Somerset, a young man with a fraudulent passport discovered that he could slip through the entire kingdom just by knowing how to carry himself. And for us, that made him the perfect guide into this world of Tudor vagabonds. It also leaves us with one last thought. If this is the story that Hext happened to catch, imagine the ones that he never found. So we will leave it there. This story is available on the Internet Archive in a PDF of a book that was about Tudor vagabond. And yeah, it's on the Internet Archive. You can check it out. I'll stick it in the notes or the comments. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, please press that like button wherever you are listening to this. It helps to feed that hungry algorithm and get our content to more people. And I hope I earned your subscription to my channel where I put out stories like this on the regular. If you want to check out that mini cast on Tudor passports, here's the link for that, or here's a video that YouTube thinks you'll like. Remember, my friend, you are deeply and truly loved. I'm so glad we share the planet with each other. You make the planet a better place, and I'm grateful we got to spend this time today talking about Tudor vagabonds. I will be back very, very soon. In the meantime, don't forget to drink your water.